the Hayden Geological Survey of 1871 explored the region of northwestern Wyoming that later became Yellowstone National Park in 1872. It was led by geologist Ferdinand Vandeveer Hayden. The 1871 survey was not Hayden's first, but it was the first federally funded, geological survey to explore and further document features in the region soon to become Yellowstone National Park, and played a prominent role in convincing the U.S. Congress to pass the legislation creating the park. In 1894, Nathaniel P. Langford, the first park superintendent and a member of the Washburn-Langford-Doane Expedition which explored the park in 1870, wrote this about the Hayden Expedition. Origins: the 1871 Hayden Survey had its roots in the Pacific Railroad Survey Bill passed by Congress in 1853 to find the best routes for railroads from the Mississippi to the Pacific coast. The bill spawned an era of federally funded great surveys undertaken by the Department of the Interior after the Civil War that brought together explorers, engineers, scientists and topographers in a common effort to chart the western U.S. Hayden, along with John Wesley Powell, Clarence King and George Wheeler, were the leaders of these great surveys. In March 1871, a sum of $40,000 was appropriated by Congress to finance Hayden's fifth survey to explore mostly the territories of Idaho and Montana. Hayden was very familiar with Jay Cook's desire to promote the Yellowstone region for the Northern Pacific Railroad and had attended Nathaniel P. Langford's January 1871 lecture in Washington, D.C. on the Washburn-Langford-Doane Expedition to Yellowstone of the previous year. The $40,000 that was granted for Hayden's expedition was not available until July 1, the beginning of the fiscal year. However, the determined Hayden was still able to organize and equip his expedition with the help of the U.S. Army, Fort Bridger and the railroads. After the passage of the Sundry Civil Bill, Hayden immediately applied to the Secretary of War for permission to draw on equipment, stores, and transportation at frontier army posts. This was authorized, together with a small escort, when deemed necessary and the public service will permit. Likewise, the Union Pacific and Central Pacific Railroads agreed to carry Hayden's men and equipment without cost. Hayden had an experienced assistant, James Stevenson. In 1866, Stevenson accompanied Hayden into the Badlands of Dakota Territory in a search for minerals and fossils, and from that time on he was Hayden's assistant in every venture until the Hayden Survey was merged with those of King and Powell to form the U.S. Geological Survey in 1879. The two were now able to outfit and equip members of Hayden's survey at Fort D. A. Russell in Wyoming and transport the equipment, subsistence, wagons, and animals he would need by rail to Ogden, Utah, where a base camp had been set up in May on an old lake terrace a mile east of the city. During the weeks leading up to the expedition, the scientists and other men were to make up the party that would venture into the Yellowstone region. In the spring of 1871, Hayden selected the members of the survey team, 32 in all, from among friends and colleagues, 7 previous survey participants, and a few political patrons. Included in the party was William Henry Jackson, his photographer from his 1870 survey, and Thomas Moran, a guest artist arranged by Jay Cook. 2 of the members, the young mineralogist Albert Peel and the botanist George Allen, were respectively a student of Hayden's at the University of Pennsylvania and Hayden's natural history professor at Oberlin College. Both Allen and Peel kept private journals of the expedition which, when discovered in later years, have brought great insight to the daily operations of the survey team. Survey route: the survey officially began on June 8, 1871 when it departed Ogden, Utah 41.22774 a degree N 111.961193 a degree W/41.227744. -111.961193 I. Although many survey members were already making observations and collecting specimens while the team was assembling in Salt Lake City and then Ogden. The party traveled north, reaching Taylor's Bridge 43.491775 a degree N 112.032509 a degree W/43.491775. -112.032509 I on the Snake River on June 25, 1871. On June 30, 1871, The survey party had reached into Montana, camping just over the Continental Divide near Monadnock Pass 44.55861 a degree N 112.30556 a degree W/44.55861. Minus 112.30556 I. Hayden and his survey party reached Virginia City, Montana 45.294107 a degree N 111.94123 a degree W/45.294107. Minus 111.94123 I on July 4, 1871 and Fort Ellis near Bozeman, Montana on July 10, 1871. By this time, Thomas Moran, the guest artist, had joined the survey. At Fort Ellis, both George Allen, the botanist, and Cyrus Thomas, the agricultural statistician and entomologist, then left the party for health reasons, while Joseph Copyright, the guide, joined the team. After resupplying and coordinating with the U.S. Army at Fort Ellis, the survey departed south along the Yellowstone River on July 15, 1871. For the next 45 days, the Hayden Survey would coordinate efforts with the Barlow Heap Expedition under the command of Colonel John W. Barlow, chief engineer for General Philip Sheridan, that the U.S. Army was sending into Yellowstone at the same time. As the survey team traveled up the Yellowstone River in what is now called Paradise Valley, they confirmed what Hayden already knew, that the trail was unsuitable for their wagons. Near Bottler's Ranch 45 a degree 19 a euro squared 30 a euro cubed N 110 a degree 47 a euro squared 33 a euro cubed W, the last outpost in the valley near Emigrant Gulch, the survey team set up a base camp that would be used to assist in any communications or support needed while the team was in the Yellowstone region with Fort Ellis. Abandoning their wagons at the base camp, the survey headed into Yankee Jim Canyon 45 a degree 11 a euro squared 43 a euro cubed N 110 a degree 54 a euro squared 05 a euro cubed W late on July 20, 1871. Yellowstone region equals. On July 21, 1871, the Hayden Survey entered the park region at the Gardner River, proceeding up that river to what is now called Mammoth Hot Springs, where they explored and camped for 2 days. At Mammoth, they found that 2 men, named J.C. McCartney and H.A. Hoare, had laid claim to 320 acres and established a ranch and bathhouse on the Mammoth Terraces near Liberty Cap. These entrepreneurs eventually established a primitive hotel at Mammoth and were not evicted from the area until many years after the park was established. On July 24, 1871, the survey team departed Mammoth en route to Tower Fall. They took a route very close to today's Mammoth Tower Road, passing both Undine Falls 44 a degree 56 a euro squared 39 a euro cubed N 110 a degree 38 a euro squared 20 a euro cubed W on Lava Creek, and Wraith Falls 44 a degree 56 a euro squared 14 a euro cubed N 110 a degree 37 a euro squared 25 a euro cubed W on Lupine Creek. They reached and camped at Tower Creek on July 25, 1871. The survey team spent 3 days traveling around Mount Washburn and along the western edge of the Yellowstone River in Hayden Valley to reach its source at Yellowstone Lake on July 28, 1871. It was here that Lieutenant Gustavus C. Doane replaced Captain Tyler as commander of the military escort. En route they camped at Cascade Creek 44 a degree 43 a euro squared 00 a euro cubed N 110 a degree 29 a euro squared 58 a euro cubed W near Yellowstone Falls, where W. H. Jackson took the first known photographs of the falls. On July 28, 1871, some members of the Hayden party assembled a small boat from components they packed in from Fort Ellis and carved oars from nearby trees. The boat, Annie, was the first known boat to sail on the waters of Yellowstone Lake. Annie was used by several members of the party to explore the islands and take soundings of the lake. The first trip was made by James Stevenson and Henry Elliott to an island about 1.5 miles offshore. Hayden named the island Stevenson Island 44 a degree 30 a euro squared 55 a euro cubed N 110 a degree 23 a euro squared 07 a euro cubed W. On July 31, 1871, Hayden and some members of his survey team left Yellowstone Lake and ventured back into the Hayden Valley, where at the Crater Hills Geyser Group they proceeded due west en route the geyser basins of the Madison River drainage. They eventually reached the headwaters of Nez Perce Copyright Creek 44 degree 34 euro squared 40 euro cubed N 110 degree 37 euro squared 13 euro cubed W, traveling down the creek until they camped about 6 miles from the Firehole River. The party spent several days in the lower, midway and upper geyser basins, finally departing on August 6, 1871. The survey followed the Firehole River upstream to Madison Lake 44 degree 20 euro squared 55 euro cubed N 110 degree 51 euro squared 58 euro cubed W, and then over the divide to Shoshone Lake, eventually camping near Lost Lake about 6 miles from the West Thumb area of Yellowstone Lake. On August 7, 1871 they camped and explored at West Thumb for 2 days. As some of the military escort were to travel back to Fort Ellis, the survey team took the opportunity to send back correspondence and a large amount of specimens collected to the base camp at Bottler's Ranch. In that correspondence was Hayden's Report No. 7 to Assistant Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, Dr. Spencer Baird, a bit of which is excerpted below. Yellowstone Lake, WY August 8, 1871. Dear Professor Baird, your letters of June 6 and July 3 were brought us from Fort Ellis by Lieutenant Doane, who has just arrived to take command of our escort and accompany my party the remainder of the season. We arrived at the banks of the Yellowstone Lake, July 26, actually July 28, and pitched our camp near the point where the river leaves the lake. Hence we brought the first pair of wheels that ever came to the lake with our odometer. We launched the first boat on the lake, 4.5 feet wide and 11 feet long, with sails and oars. A chart of this soundings will be made. Points have been located with a prismatic compass all around the lake. A man stands on the shore with a compass and takes a bearing to the man in the boat as he drops the lead, giving a signal at the time. Then a man in the boat takes a bearing to the fixed points on the shore where the first man is located, and thus the soundings will be located on the chart. Henry Elliott and Mr. Carrington have just left in our little boat, the Annie. They will make a systematic sketch of the shore with all its indentations, with the banks down, indeed, making a complete topographical as well as pictorial sketch of the shores as seen from the water, for a circuit of at least 130 miles. One of the islands has been explored. We have called it Stevenson's Island, as he was undoubtedly the first human that ever set foot upon it. We found everything in the geyser region even more wonderful than it has been represented. I send this back to you by James Stevenson, who returns to our permanent camp for supplies. We hope to reach Fort Ellis about the 1st or 5th of September. Paragraph NBORN does splendid topographical work. Write at once. Yours truly, F.V. Hayden. I will send you some photographs soon. Between August 9 and August 19, 1871, the survey party traveled around the southern and eastern sides of Yellowstone Lake, crossing the Continental Divide twice and exploring the headwaters of the Yellowstone River. On August 19 they arrived at the northeast corner of the lake at Steamboat Point 44 degree 31 euro squared 54 euro cubed N 110 degree 17 euro squared 34 euro cubed W, near Turbid Lake, where they camped for a few days in preparation for their return to the Yellowstone River via the East Fork. While camped at Steamboat Point, the party experienced 2 sizable earthquakes, one that Peel described as, "This morning, August 20, about 1 o'clock we had quite an earthquake. The first shock, SIG, lasted about 20 seconds and was followed by 5 or 6 shorter ones. Duncan, who was on guard, says that the trees were shaken and that the horses that were lying on the ground sprang to their feet. We had 3 shocks during the morning." On August 23, 1871, after dismantling and caching Annie, the party moved northeast away from Yellowstone Lake until they encountered Pelican Creek. They followed the creek northeast until they reached the divide at Mirror Lake 44 degree 44 euro squared 05 euro cubed N 110 degree 09 euro squared 51 euro cubed W, where they camped. The next morning they continued northeast until encountering the headwaters of the East Fork of the Yellowstone River, Lamar River. Following the river downstream they camped just short of Soda Butte Creek. In the morning, on August 25, 1871 they entered the Upper Lamar Valley and traveled on good trails northwest through the valley all the way to the Yellowstone River at Baronet Bridge 44°, 55 euro squared 45 euro cubed N 110 degree 24 euro squared 03 euro cubed W. In October 1870, John C. Baronet, a Helena prospector, helped rescue Truman C. Everts after he had become lost during the Washburn Expedition of 1870. After rescuing Everts, Baronet returned to Yellowstone and constructed a pack train bridge across the Yellowstone just above the mouth of the Lamar River. This was the first bridge across the Yellowstone. In 1878, during a later survey, Hayden named a nearby peak 44°, 58 euro squared 31 euro cubed N 110 degree 05 euro squared 19 euro cubed W in honor of John Baronet. By the evening of August 26, 1871 most of the survey party had left the park region and was camped just north of Gardner on the Yellowstone River. The next day, most would rendezvous at Bottler's Ranch. After reaching Bottler's, Dr. Hayden posted his report number 8, August 28, 1871 to Spencer Baird. Dear Professor Baird, we have completed our survey of the Upper Yellowstone, SIC. Our success has been complete. Our map is now complete of every stream emptying into the lake or river above this point. Henry Elliott and young Carrington returned in 7 days with a wonderful sketch of the lake. Henry Elliott has sketched all the craters, the geysers in motion, the mud springs, etc. We have a splendid lot of specimens also. We have about 400 negatives. The lake has been well photographed. Hughes does not amount to much. I shall drop him at Chicago and that will end him so far as I am concerned. I intend to have a nice little fellow. Dr. Peel, of Philadelphia, spend the winter at Washington arranging our collections. He is, I think, a young man of the right stamp. Henry Elliott is the biggest kind of trump. He had done some great things on this trip. Yours truly, F.E. Hayden. The return to Fort Bridger equals. After leaving Bottler's Ranch, the party took 2 days to arrive at Fort Ellis where they spent 6 days recuperating, resupplying and preparing correspondence and specimens for shipment. 3 members of the party Hughes, Dixon and Adams departed for California. During this stay, Hayden had the opportunity to respond to a letter from George Allen, his former professor who had to leave the survey before it entered the Yellowstone region. Fort Ellis, September 2, 1871, My dear Professor Allen, we have just returned having completed our work to our entire satisfaction. We have had an uninterrupted series of successes, without a single pullback. Not an accident has happened to any member of our party. We made a most admirable survey of the Yellowstone Basin, SIC, the lake, all the hot springs. Mr. Jackson made the most abundant pictures. Mr. Moran was filled with enthusiasm and has returned to devote himself to the painting of pictures of the Yellowstone, SIC region. I am sorry that you were not able to see the wonderful things in the Yellowstone, SIC, but when reports come before the world, you will get a pretty clear conception of them. All my party are well and speak of you with affection. Yours most sincerely, F.E. Hayden. On September 5, 1871 the remaining members of the Hayden party, less their military escort, departed Fort Ellis en route to Three Forks, Montana and the Jefferson River Valley. They followed the Jefferson up to the Beaverhead River where they camped at Beaverhead Rock 45°, 23 euro squared 11 euro cubed N 112°, 27 euro squared 35 euro cubed W on September 9, 1871. Jackson took the first photographs of Beaverhead Rock. They continued south, eventually crossing the divide near Red Rock River. By the evening of September 14, 1871 they were camped on Medicine Lodge Creek in Idaho. They followed Medicine Lodge Creek down into the Snake River Plain, arriving at Fort Hall on September 18, 1871, camping where they had camped during their inbound journey on June 21, 1871. At Fort Hall, Hayden wrote Spencer Baird in his report number 10. Fort Hall, Idaho, September 18, 1871. Dear Professor Baird, one wrote to you that we left Fort Ellis the morning of September 5. We passed down the Gallatin Valley to the Three Forks, thence by the Jefferson to its very sources, exploring many of its branches. If you look at Colonel Reynolds' map, you will see that the river was omitted. We returned from Fort Hall by way of Soda Springs, Bear Lake by Bear River, to Evanston on the railroad, thence to Fort Bridger where our expedition will close. All is well with us. We are moving along pleasantly without accident of interruption. We perform a good day's work every day. We have not lost a day from storms or anything else since we left Ogden in June last. Yours truly, F.V. Hayden. By September 29, 1871 the survey party had reached Evanston, Wyoming Territory where they boarded a Union Pacific Railroad train to Fort Bridger, arriving there on October 2, 1871. At Fort Bridger, Hayden officially concluded the survey and disbanded the survey team. Hayden and Peel made their way to Salt Lake City and then back to Washington, D.C. Jackson and Charlie Turnbull at the urging of Hayden traveled to Nebraska where they photographed Pawnee Indians on the Omaha Reservation. Survey operations. Once the survey team was organized and underway, the general route and camping locations would be determined by James Stevenson, the survey manager and director, and Stephen Hovey, the wagon master. In open country, as they found in northern Utah, the survey party traveled an average of 15 miles per day. Routinely after several days of march and when required to rest the party, process their findings and resupply, they would camp at a favorable location for several days. While camping and on the march, the various scientists, photographers and topographers would venture out in small teams from the main party to collect specimens, make observations and document the flora, fauna, geology and geography of the land. In this regard, Dr. Hayden was just another scientist. Additionally, the hunters would attempt to acquire enough game to sustain the party. In camp, the scientists would process and document their findings while preparing them for shipment to the Smithsonian Institution at the next available opportunity. Botanical specimens were pressed, dried and labeled. Mineral samples were trimmed, labeled and packaged for shipment. Photographs were catalogued and described. Correspondence was prepared to scientists in the East explaining the findings and progress of the survey. When next the survey party encountered a station that could handle mail or express shipments usually a town, stage stop or army facility the prepared materials and correspondence would be shipped east. George Allen, the botanist, describes a typical day in the early portion of the survey in his journal. Thursday, June 29, 1871, after the camp broke up, went with a photographic corps on a hill overlooking the vale and changed the papers of the pressed plants, while Jackson took pictures. The hills in this passway to Montana are all of igneous character. But there are other varieties of rock boulders indicating a different character to the higher mountain passes around. After 12 miles traveled today in which we were rapidly ascending, we came to the summit of the China the Divide. At our camp the PM 5 miles from the divide, we have excellent grass and water, and it is understood that we will remain over here one day to recruit. Collected and pressed a large amount of plants. Also found in the streams a number of shells, limneas and fizzes. Junction station is near our camp. Survey members, equipment and transport. Note, there are conflicting accounts as to who were Hayden's topographers or map makers. Existing account names Anton Sh. paragraph NBORN and Alfred J. Smith. Another account names Henry Gannett and that many USGS map-making methods and standards were later developed under his leadership, and the USGS Geography Program was established under his direction. Period accounts by members of the expedition. Hayden, F.V. Preliminary Report of the United States Geological Survey of Montana and portions of adjacent territories being a 5th Annual Report of Progress. Washington, D.C. U.S. Department of Interior. Peel, Albert C. The Yellowstone. Philadelphia Press. Hayden, F.V. More about the Yellowstone. Scribner's Monthly 388-396. Expedition's influence on creation of a national park, the most important product of the expedition. In addition to the sketches and paintings by Thomas Moran and the photographs by William Jackson, was Hayden's lengthy report detailing the findings of his party. Hayden, working with Nathaniel Langford and J. Cook, was so desirous of preserving the Yellowstone region that he even included drawings and descriptions of thermal features from Langford's 1871 articles in Scribner's. Hayden presented this report, the photos, sketches, and paintings to senators, congressmen, his superiors in the Department of the Interior, and nearly everyone else who could possibly influence the founding of a park. Most importantly, his political connections with Congressman Henry L. Dawes of Massachusetts paid dividends. Dawes had supported financing of the expedition, his son Chester Dawes was a member of the survey team, and Annie, the first boat on Yellowstone Lake, was purportedly named after his daughter, Anna Dawes. Hayden also published articles in magazines with national circulation and spent much personal time and effort trying to convince Congress to establish the park. On December 18, 1871, a bill was introduced simultaneously in the Senate, by Senator S. C. Pomeroy of Kansas, and in the House of Representatives, by Congressman William H. Claggett of the Montana Territory, for the establishment of a park at the headwaters of the Yellowstone River. Hayden's influence on Congress is readily apparent when examining the detailed information contained in the report of the House Committee on Public Lands. The bill now before Congress has for its objective the withdrawal from settlement, occupancy, or sale, under the laws of the United States, a tract of land 55 by 65 miles, about the sources of the Yellowstone and Missouri rivers, and dedicates and sets apart as a great national park or pleasure ground for the benefit and enjoyment of the people. When the bill was presented to Congress, the bill's chief supporters, ably prepared by Langford, Hayden and J. Cook, convinced their colleagues that the region's real value was as a park area, to be preserved in its natural state. The bill was approved by a comfortable margin in the Senate on January 30, 1872, and by the House on February 27. On March 1, 1872, President Ulysses S. Grant signed the bill into law, establishing the Yellowstone region as a public park, memorializing the results of 3 years of exploration by Cook, Folsom Peterson, Washburn-Langford-Doane, and Hayden. Park features named in honor of members of the 1871 expedition. Carrington Island, named for E. Campbell Carrington; Mount Doane, named for Lieutenant Gustavus C. Doane; Frank Island, named for the brother of Henry Elliott, Frank Elliott; Hayden Valley, named for Ferdinand V. Hayden; Moran Point, named for Thomas Moran; Mount Jackson, named for William Henry Jackson; Peel Island, named for Albert C. Peel; Mount Stevenson, named for James Stevenson; Stevenson Island, named for James Stevenson. Additional reading: Hayden, F. V. The Great West, Its Attractions and Resources, containing a popular description of the marvelous scenery, physical geography, fossils and glaciers of the wonderful region, and the recent explorations of the Yellowstone Park, the Wonderland of America. Bloomington, Illinois, Charles A. Brodix. Chittenden, Hiram Martin. The Yellowstone Park Historical and Descriptive. Cincinnati, Ohio, Stewart and Kidd Company Publishers. ISBN 1-4179-0456-9. Bonney, Orrin H. Battle Drums and Geysers: The Life and Journals of Lieutenant Gustavus Cheney Doane, Soldier and Explorer of the Yellowstone and Snake River Regions. Chicago, Swallow Press. Ferdinand Vandeveer Hayden and the Founding of the Yellowstone National Park. Washington, D.C., United States Department of the Interior Geological Survey, U.S. Government Printing Office. 1973. Haynes, Aubrey L. The Yellowstone Story: A History of Our First National Park. Yellowstone National Park, W.I., Yellowstone Library and Museum Association. ISBN 0-585-02501-0. Chambers, Frank, ed. Jackson, William Henry. Hayden and His Men, being a selection of 108 photographs by William Henry Jackson of the United States Geological and Geographical Survey of the Territories for the years 1870 to 1878. Francis Paul Geoscience Literature. Merrill, Marlene Dale, ed. Yellowstone and the Great West Journals, Letters and images from the 1871 Hayden Expedition. Lincoln, Nebraska, University of Nebraska Press. ISBN 0-8032-3148-2. Schullery, Paul. Whitley, Lee H. Myths and History and the Creation of Yellowstone National Park. Yellowstone National Park, the Yellowstone Association. ISBN 0-8032-4305-7. Scott, Kim Allen. Yellowstone Denied the Life of Gustavus Cheney Doane. Norman, Oklahoma, University of Oklahoma Press. ISBN 978-0-8061-3800-8. See also, Cook-Folsom-Peterson Expedition, Washburn-Langford-Doane Expedition, Expeditions and the Protection of Yellowstone, United States Geological Survey. Notes. External links.